Shalom, Shalom and welcome. Welcome to White Robes family. My name is Symmanayah, and these represent the messages I am compelled to present before an awakening, set-apart nation, Yashar'al. This is the 34th installment of White Robes family. Please note the terms you see at the bottom of the screen. For questions represent one who seeks. And if we are indeed set apart, if we are indeed children of the Almighty Father Yahuah, we should seek to discern his living guidance. It would be wise to seek him out, seek to discern, and listen to his voice as he guides us through these end times. Before I get into this 34th segment, let me read the following. Warning and disclaimer. The information contained in White Robes family represent instructions and warnings to individuals who believe they are drawn by the Almighty Creator, Yahuah, to Yahusha Mashyach. The content presented centers around end-time realities. Please be advised, this site is not intended for children under 16 years of age due to its content. By continuing forward, you agree to hold Symmanayah harmless of any influence in or actions that arise as a result of watching, listening, and reviewing the content presented. The views expressed do not reflect the owners, management, and or shareholders of this media platform. White Robes family is not affiliated with any other ministries with similar names. With that said, let's press on. My brothers and sisters, this segment here is to bring attention to the word unleavened versus leavened bread. As we begin to have discussions with one another regarding leaven, let us be mindful that leaven is an influence. It represents influence. There are good influences, there are bad. There are set apart influences, there are wicked influences. When one is teaching, preaching, talking, or sharing the word leavened or unleavened bread, ask them to qualify it. Ask them to explain what they mean. You see, even though there may be someone in your group that's around you often know what you mean, there may be someone new looking at you on YouTube, any other social media platform, or who have come into the camp or community or fellowship that may not know what you mean. So we must begin to qualify unleavened versus leavened bread, for there is good leaven and there is bad leaven. Come with me, my brothers and sisters. Let's discuss these matters. I want to bring your attention to Exodus 12, verse 15. It says, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day you cause leaven to cease from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that being shall be cut off from Yashar'al. My brothers and sisters, unleavened bread. It literally means unleavened bread. The spiritual side to this verse is letting you see, my brothers and sisters, when we listen to the voice of the Most High, how to pay attention to him and him alone. And therefore what we eat of is not influenced by anyone else, but he that is working in us. You see, my brothers and sisters, it didn't say that leavened bread is wicked. It's just saying at this point, he wants us to eat unleavened bread. That's the literal. The spiritual side is to focus on him and him alone. And we will grow to recognize what this means. Deuteronomy 16:4 says, and no leaven should be seen with you in all your border for 7 days. Neither should any of the meat which you slaughter in the evening on the first day stay all night until morning. My brothers and sisters, we can look at the literal and stop right there. But if we stop too soon, we miss the spiritual instruction that are given to us. If we don't understand the dynamics of leaven, my brothers and sisters, that it means influence. Continue with me, please. Matthew 13:33 says, another parable he spoke to them. The reign of the heavens is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal until all was leavened. You see here a good influence, my brothers and sisters. That was Matthew 13:33. Matthew 16:6, and Yahusha said to them, mind and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. It is important, my brothers and sisters, for us to remember there is good and bad leavening. Sometimes when we stop, we may miss the message that a brother or sister is delivering to us if we don't ask them to present qualifiers. What do you mean when you're speaking of leaven? What do you mean when you're speaking of unleavened bread? What's good? What's bad leaven? Qualifiers are necessary to avoid confusion. Qualifiers are necessary so that we're on the same page. End times are here, my brothers and sisters. Make no mistake. There are those who bear false witness when someone says leaven is good. And then someone else says, I'll show you a verse that says leaven is bad. We must be able to lean on the voice of the Spirit of Yahusha, our teacher, our guide, and know when leaven is good and when leaven is bad. In order to do so, let us get to the spirit of the matter. The function of the matter, my brothers and sisters, is influence. There are good influences and there are bad influence. When the scriptures talk about abstain and eat unleavened bread, it wants us to know what it's like to exist without the influences in our food. There's much that can be learned by this, my brothers and sisters. And you see the color blue that I'm wearing? I mentioned this as a reminder to me and something that could help you. I use black and white to symbolize the feast time purpose, a time of instruction. And so I put up posts that's relative to instructions that can lead to an improved life through Yahusha Mashyach. And I use black because out of darkness, the Most High created all. Darkness was as his landscape. And so light came, his light, in us, through us, one towards another. I use blue to symbolize his word because when we come into life through Yahusha Mashyach, we must discern the difference between right and wrong. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is to bring our attention to the importance of listening to the voice of the Spirit of Yahusha. Studying, growing, listen to him working through us one towards another for the purposes of discerning the difference between good or wrong, good or evil. And I use green to represent first fruits, brown to represent harvest, a caramel color or orange, a highlighted color to represent trumpets, red to represent atonement, the blood of the Lamb, and purple to represent tabernacle. And I've said to many, this is not ordered. I'm sharing with you an example that helps reinforce the understanding of the 7 major feast times. My brothers and sisters, good and bad leaven. Leavening, again, is influence. Come with me, my brothers and sisters. And I say this is important because, see, as it is written in the 10 Commandments, you hear brothers and sisters say, I obey the 10 Commandments and laws and statutes. But if they don't know a matter, if they falsely judge a matter, if they don't understand a matter, they may condemn the actions of someone speaking if they're saying good leaven. They say, oh, leaven is bad. Let me show you some verses that talks about leaven is bad. Well, we can show equal verses that show where leaven is good. So we must qualify. We must define what we're talking about when we're talking about unleavened or leavened bread. But what's most important is understanding that the part where it talks about not eating leavened bread to go with unleavened bread, the main message he's trying to say is be mindful. There are times when we must lean and pray directly to the Almighty Father, opposed to being influenced by anyone. We must be able to discern when he's working through us one towards another. This is an important factor, my brothers and sisters. Come with me. In 1 Corinthians 5, verse 6 through 8, it reads as follows. Your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the entire lump? Therefore cleanse out the old leaven so that you are a new lump, as you are unleavened. For also Messiah on Pesach, or Passover, was slaughtered for us. So then let us celebrate the festival, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of evil and wickedness, but with unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. That was 1 Corinthians 5, 6 through 8. Notice, let me go back to that. Notice, my brothers and sisters, how it mentions boasting is not good. You see, oftentimes there are brothers and sisters who are looking back on what they did yesterday, last week, last month. They're looking back, they're turning back, taking their hands off the plow and looking back, opposed to looking forward and pressing forward. And they boast on the things they did yesterday. But here it's saying, your boasting is not good. And if you doubt that, what can you boast of unless it's something of the past? Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the entire lump? If you're spending more time on the past, it can affect others. Start saying, well, I did this yesterday, and I did that yesterday, and last week, and last year, and 30 years ago. I've been in the truth for a decade, 2 decades. My brothers and sisters, we need to learn what it is to press forward. It say, cleanse out the old leaven so that you are a new lump. Could this be akin to when he said we die day by day and we are renewed? Could this be saying, my brothers and sisters, in this case, the old leaven, the old things that were influencing people, it's time to press on to what the Spirit of the Almighty Father is saying now, today, going forward? My brothers and sisters, you see, looking back on what we did under the guise of let me give you my testimony, we will find in some cases that's not a wise thing to do. You see, my brothers and sisters, failure to use qualifiers when using leavened or unleavened causes confusion. Saying it's okay to always give my testimony. Yes, let us praise Yahusha for the life that we have to this day. With each breath, let us praise the Almighty Father in the name of Yahusha. Indeed, we have something to be grateful for. But there's so much ahead of us. There's so much to learn. There's so much to demonstrate. There's so much to do one towards another and together as a set-apart awakening nation. To prepare for these final days, that final exodus, the final breath of our brothers who will face death as martyrs for Yahusha's name. The final days for those who will journey back to the promised land and fulfill what is written. My brothers and sisters, when we are speaking to one another, if we misunderstand one another, or if we think one has trespassed or is in error, let us inquire of that brother or sister to see what they mean. Let us bring out the qualifiers, explain what you mean. What qualifies leavened versus unleavened? What are you talking about? What influences are we identifying, O Yashar'al? Or do we want to be so quick, so anxious that we find ourselves bearing false witness against one another? If that's the case, we've violated one of the 10 commandments. So if we sincerely seek to obey the 10 commandments, my brothers and sisters, let us make sure that we're judging, that we're examining, Spirit, as the Spirit leads us and guides us and directs us and open our eyes and ears, as our spirit stirs and weigh the matters and discover what the Spirit of Yahusha has to say. Speaking too soon, my brothers and sisters, we may face hardships. We may face pain and regret. We may face things that weaken the physical body to bring us into discipline. Pray, O Yashar'al. End times are here and they require much. As end times get intense, my brothers and sisters, communications demand the use of qualifiers to avoid confusion. Don't be afraid to ask moray, teacher, pastor, community head questions. For the scriptures tell us to examine all things. Examine the one in the mirror. Examine those we are. The scriptures also inform us to restore such a one when we see a brother have fallen. This could be a moray, teacher, pastor, bishop, husband, wife, child. We must understand that as end times ramp up, we will begin to recognize the presence of the Almighty Father Yahuah and Yahusha's name working in us. He may even speak through a child. And we have the example with our forefather David, when he took out Goliath. You see, my brothers and sisters, if we look beyond the physical vessels, the power of the Spirit that we are joined with, the power of the Spirit of Yahuah, brings so much to recognize and acknowledge. Hear, O Yashar'al, end times are here. Let us know when we celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when we begin to talk about unleavened bread. Let us talk about the role of influence. Let us discern the difference between good and evil, right and wrong. And this can be accomplished through prayer and studying and discerning the Spirit, making alive the scriptures that we study, through teaching and preaching by those who are led by the Spirit of the Almighty Father in Yahushua's name. We shall grow, we shall be refined, we shall rise up, O Yashar'al, prepared to witness a massive numbering of set-apart children rising out of the dark days, out of the intense times. Pray, O Yashar'al. Let me continue. I invite you to consider the following. Matthew 24:22. It says, if those days were not shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the sake of the chosen one, those days shall be shortened. My brothers and sisters, many are looking for something extraordinary and phenomenal. But I say to you, in inquiring and asking questions before the Almighty Father, I believe the Spirit of Yahusha said to me, the days will be shortened because there will be forced migrations. We will move from one time zone to the next. If you want to know what I mean, consider if you were in California and you went from California to the east coast of the United States. You will lose 2 hours, 3 hours, I believe it's 3 hours. 3 hours are lost. And consider the east coast of the United States to Jerusalem. And I believe 7 hours are lost. So in migrating to the promised land, my brothers and sisters, those in the Western Hemisphere will see that the days are shortened. This is what it means. It's letting us know that those days will be shortened because there will be movement back to the region where life began. Colossians 4:5 say, walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, redeeming the time. I stress this often, my brothers and sisters. What is the value of a minute, an hour, 2 hours? What is the value of a day, a week, a month? The time is now for us to recognize the life that we have is given to us for a reason. Isaiah 11:12 saying, he shall raise a banner for the nations and gather the outcasts of Yashar'al and assemble the dispersed of Yehudah from the four corners of the earth. My brothers and sisters, there will be a great gathering, a gathering in which no man would be able to count the numbers. My brothers and sisters, we who are drawn of the Almighty Yahuah to Yahusha, We will learn to ask questions. We will learn to seek to discern and examine answers. We will learn how it is important, how questions and answers help make qualifiers better. In other words, to qualify, what do I mean? In order to know that by asking questions, it makes communications better, my brothers and sisters. We must and we will get on the same page, O Yashar'al. Though we are many members, we are one body in Yahusha Mashyach. The time is now. Don't be afraid to ask the questions that draw you closer to the Most High. Don't be afraid to answer the questions. Ask the questions and seek out the answers and examine the answers. Don't be afraid to use qualifiers when we're speaking to explain what it is we mean so that we can be on the same page. For in the discipline that the Almighty Father has promised, our communications will improve in the coming days. Pray and watch, O Yashar'al. Pray and watch, for there are many plans that are unfolding. Many, O Yashar'al. And I say this, the plan in which I find myself drawn to, White Rose family, consists of building a set-apart team of leaders, vetted, my brothers and sisters, chosen by the Spirit of the Almighty Father, proven to be led by the Spirit of Yahusha, to develop an information and resource center, to build a team with diverse skill sets, acting as mentors and mentees, and interacting with one another to grow strong as we find ourselves coming together as we are awakened, coming together in unity to purchase land in Virginia, which I believe will be the exit point for the Western Hemisphere, my brothers and sisters, before going across the ocean. To identify and support safe zones as we find ourselves beginning to migrate from one city, one state, one location to another. And there will be those outside of the Western Hemisphere and other countries, and I believe they will find themselves going to the outermost border that points towards the Promised Land, that points directly to Mount Sinai, the true Mount Sinai, which is currently known as Jabal al-Lawz. The plan consists of providing guidance and support for completing the journey. Guidance for the inner court, which represents the set-apart ones that are alive and awakened to fulfill various end times tasks. To provide the instructions, the interactions, and guidance as it relates to waiting on Yahusha Mashiach's physical return. There is a plan, my brothers and sisters, and I believe there are other plans that are similar or at the very least connect with the plan that the Most High has put before my very eyes. And with all things, my brothers and sisters, know this, there is a cost. Count the cost. And I use the term, use it or lose it. Consider the talents. The parable in Matthew 25th chapter, verse 14 to 30. You can look at this as reality or fear-mongering. Your choice will not bring about excuses, my brothers and sisters. There are no excuses. When the mark of the beast comes, the value of the monies that we have will change. If not, an economic collapse will strip us of the finances that we currently have. The gold, the silver, as famine and pestilence increase and destruction begin, the jewel that one will seek after will be fresh water, food, and a safe place. I say to you, O Yashar'al, examine your surroundings. Examine those you are directed and drawn to by the Almighty Father, and ask yourself, what is your responsibility? Is it to gather resources, skill sets, people with various skill sets, money, and begin to build up Yashar'al as we find ourselves coming together? Are you the one to be the custodian of or recipient of various supplies and resources and ration them out accordingly? Are you one who have the wealth, the resources, or skill sets to contribute towards the fitting together of a scattered nation that is beginning to be drawn together? Use it or lose it, my brothers and sisters. For in sickness and famine and pestilent disease, you become too weak. The stamina that you have today, you may not have tomorrow. Pray and watch, O Yashar'al. If I am saying anything that remotely resembles life, that draws you to Yahusha Mashiach, Consider subscribing, my brothers and sisters. Consider sharing. Consider supporting, contributing, investing in this plan, sponsoring this plan. I've set up a White Robes account under White Robes Family. White Robes Family, my brothers and sisters. I also have a PayPal account in which, if you're interested, reach out and let me know. If you have various skill sets that you'd like to contribute or make known for the body of Yashar'al to recognize you, what the Almighty Father have given you favor to acquire, certain skills, certain talents, certain experiences, even certain education. Yashar'al, oh Yashar'al, the time is now to begin to ask yourself, what am I tasked to do, O Father, Almighty Yahuah, in the name of Yahusha? What is it that you would have me to do? Yashar'al, oh Yashar'al, unleavened versus leavened bread. Let us use qualifiers when speaking of such. Let us realize that sometimes as we move about, we may not be able to go back to make the correction, but the blood of the Lamb covers as we repent and ask for forgiveness. The blood of the Lamb makes anew, O Yashar'al. Let us begin to speak on the same page. Let us begin to recognize when we have differences. Let us ask questions. We may be able, through the power and might of the Almighty Father, we may find ourselves coming into unity. And there are those who will be stubborn, bullheaded. There are those who are overtaken by false teachings, old-time behaviors, old teachings. The time is now to raise up anew from the blood of the Lamb. The time is now to recognize the corrections that are going forward. The time is now to identify the obedient of the Almighty Father Yahuah and be able to discern between right or wrong. The time is now to let go of the ego and the pride and to get under the blood of the Lamb and seek forgiveness and rise up and yield to reproof. Each of us will learn the swiftness and importance of such. We will learn the dynamics and power of the Spirit within these tabernacles, my brothers and sisters. End times are here. Look around, they're ramping up. So let us begin to understand the importance of unity and who it is that we love and what are we willing to release in order to get under the blood of the Lamb, forgiven for our mistakes, our stumbles, our fall, and rise up in the set-apart spirit, sin in Yahusha's name, renewed. It's so much ahead of us, my brothers and sisters. It's so much for us to do. And be not overtaken by those that keep saying remnant, remnant, remnant. There will be millions, O Yashar'al, millions. But when you compare it to the world population, it will be a remnant. Pray and watch. Stay tuned, O Yashar'al, for there is much more to come. There is so much to prepare us and equip us with the things that we need as we find ourselves coming together as an awakening nation. I salute your patience, your tolerance, your hunger for set apartness. I salute you, my brother, my sister. And on that note, I say to you, O set apart awakening nation, in the name of Yahusha, I say to you, Shalum.